Where would you picture finding a treasure of gold and copper, a depot for exotic spices, and a luxurious bathhouse all in one place? Here? In the desert? In the middle of nowhere? Observe this environment. It certainly appears to be an obscure, desolate location. It is 25 minutes south of the Dead Sea in the beginning of the Negev in an area that's known as the Arava. But here we are at the remains of the biblical Tamar Park, which housed not one, but 4 fortresses, a caravanserai, a cult worship center, and finally a British police station, in addition to all that was mentioned above. Its inhabitation spanned well over 1,000 years, and by 7 different societies. There are 8 different strata or levels of inhabitation in this remote location. Okay, so why here? Well, if you look at this ancient map, you'll see that in reality, this is anything but remote. It's on crossroads going in all directions, both nationally and internationally, rendering control of this area very strategic. The first to make use of this location was Shlomo HaMelech, or King Solomon, as it states in Melachim Aleph, 1 Kings, chapter 9, that Tamar was one of the places built by Shlomo. In that chapter, it also states that Shlomo's men went down to Etzion Gever, or today's Eilat, to bring back gold from foreign lands. Looking at the map, we can see the road to Eilat is directly south of here, and its shipment of gold would be stored here along the trip. Ancient copper mines were 30 kilometers southeast, with copper being a great source of income. A fortress was needed to secure a storage place and the route to Yerushalayim. Again, if you look at the map, Tamar is rather close to the border of the ancient Edom, and a fortress was needed to protect the border. But the most important reason in choosing specifically here in this desert is water, the most important necessity. Tamar is located on the Chativah spring, which fed it a year-long water supply. If you look at the aerial view of Tamar, it appears to be a huge mess of ruins, but archaeologists were able to determine which parts belong to which era. Shlomo didn't need a huge fortress, and so a rather small 12 by 11 meter fortress was built. We can see the remains of the 4-chambered gates that were typical of places built during his reign. This fortress probably didn't last too long. It was possibly destroyed during the reign of Shlomo's son Rechavam, when Egypt invaded and seized the gold that Shlomo had accumulated. When later Judean kings were powerful once again, perhaps between 75 and 125 years later, again a fortress was built to protect the southern border and serve as an administration center. They built a larger structure, 50 by 50 meters, with the same gates from the Salomonic era. Many storage rooms are from that time. Not long after that, a need arose for an immense structure. This fortress doubled in size to 100 by 100 meters. 3 guard towers were built and an outer wall was doubled, known as casement walls. Storage rooms were built and the remains of wheat and barley grains were unearthed. It was the largest Judean fortress ever built, and it was quite an impressive sight. With the rise of the Assyrian Empire in the 8th century BCE, mass destruction and havoc was inflicted on Israel. First, the 10 tribes were exiled, and then when in 701 BCE King Chizkiyahu rebelled against them, the long arm of the Assyrians reached even here. The great fortress, with all its safeguardings, couldn't hold up to the mighty empire, and this huge fortress was set ablaze and destroyed. A layer of ash was unearthed in many of the rooms, as well as a number of arrowheads. In the vacuum that was created, the Edomites inhabited here and built a cultic center. Many cultic objects were discovered and can be found today in the Israel Museum. About this time, the Israelites returned and resettled here. Remains of a 4-room house have been excavated. This housing complex was typical of the houses found in Israel, with rooms around a central courtyard. It had been a 2-story structure. Also at this time, many of the cultic items had been smashed. It is assumed that this occurred during the reign of King Yoshiyahu in the 7th century BCE. King Yoshiyahu was adamant on religious repentance, and throughout Judea, troops were sent to destroy any idols and inappropriate religious practices. With the destruction of the first Beit HaMikdash, the temple, this area lay dormant for 500 years, until the Nabataeans included this area along their famed spice route. The Nabataeans were Arabic nomadic tribes who knew how to navigate through deserts and find precious water sources. They would bring exotic spices from the Arabian Peninsula through the desert until the port of Gaza to ship it to Europe. These tribes would travel in extensive convoys and would have prepared way stations along the journey. Being on the journey after Petra and a reliable water source, Tamar served the Nabataeans as a station with a small fortress and a temple. Remains from that era were under the Roman fortress. Eventually, the Romans took over this coveted spice route and this way station as well. During the Roman era, from the 2nd to the 4th centuries, yet another fortress was built here. This was considered the southern end of the Roman Empire, and they built fortresses to defend against nomadic Bedouin tribes. It was a small structure measuring 46 by 46 meters, the size similar to that of the first structure of the Israelites. In each corner, towers projected high above. But you can't expect Roman soldiers to be stationed way out in the middle of nowhere in a desert. So they built a luxurious 7-room bathhouse. Remains of a Roman cistern are visible, but their main water source was a spring. This bathhouse had many different rooms with baths of varying temperatures ranging from cold to hot, as well as a sauna and a dressing room. One room held the furnace to heat the water for the hot tub. In addition, an inn where travelers could stay was built right next door. But the Roman presence ended abruptly when in 363 a huge earthquake struck here and all was destroyed. Though this oasis was used in the Byzantine and the Arab eras, and also served perhaps as outposts, the area basically laid in waste until 1918 when the British entered the country and they built a police station here. It remained all the while they were here in Israel until 1948. They built a well and an aqueduct to bring water to a trough for the camels and the police station. Israel acquired control of this area in November 1948 in Operation Lot. Also in this area is a huge juju tree dating back nearly 1,000 years. This tree has become the symbol of the Arava. And so this oasis lies right off the main highway, waiting for visitors to remake its acquaintance with its 3,000 years of history.